Shocking verdict. FIA responds to Red Bull cheating. So this is what we're going to be looking at, as the FIA has responded to Red Bull's allegations of cheating, and it would indeed make the rivals of Red Bull very mad. Mercedes have turned out to be in the right by saying that Red Bull breached the budget cap, and although the breach is considered to be a minor one, meaning that it's under 5%, this doesn't sit right with Mercedes. Now, after the 2021 championship has ended the way it did, full of controversies, it seems like Verstappen can lose his championship in the same controversial way that he claimed it. There is a real possibility that the 2022 championship will be Verstappen's maiden one, and Hamilton will be the record breaker when it comes to the number of championships. So stick around with us to find out how big this possibility is. Now, the budget cap was implemented in the 2021 season, and it was a much needed weapon for the F1 teams to spend as much money as they possibly can. The $145 million that F1 teams were given as a limit in 2021 has been shredded down to $140 million in 2022, and it's supposed to be shredded down to $135 million in 2023. This means that teams would have to be much more innovative and implement cheap solutions to some issues that have emerged due to the new regulations that took place in 2022. But it seems like in 2021, Red Bull spent more than the $145 million that was a limit to all of the teams on the grid. Apart from them, Aston Martin committed a small breach, but it was something non-significant and a procedural one, meaning that it doesn't influence the outcome of their season that much. As for Red Bull, they already had their hands full of defending the controversial championship of Verstappen, and this will be additional salt to the wound. The Austrian team has issued a statement saying that they're surprised and disappointed by the FIA's verdict, but they cannot deny the fact that they spent much more money than the original limit, and that's something they have to face the consequences of now. The FIA has labelled Red Bull's breach a minor one, meaning that they spent less than 5% of the $145 million in this breach. More precisely, Red Bull didn't spend more than $7.25 million in 2021, more than $145 million, and according to reports, the breach goes between $1 to $2 million. But what's even more concerning is the fact that Hamilton said that in 2021, if Mercedes had $300,000 more to spend, they would have brought a new revised front wing or new floor that would have changed the outcome of the season. When talking about this matter, Hamilton said, "I remember last year in Silverstone and we had our last upgrade. Unfortunately, it was great, we could fight with it. But then we would see Red Bull every weekend or every other weekend bringing upgrades. They had, I think, at least 4 more upgrades from that point. If we spent $300,000 on a new floor or an adapted wing, it would have changed the outcome of the championship, naturally, because we would have been in better competition in the next race you had it on. So I hope that's not the case for the sport." Now that the FIA has brought its final verdict to Red Bull's breach, labelling it as a minor one, let's see what are the possible consequences that the team will likely face. For starters, they're likely to see a reduction of time spent in wind tunnels, a public reprimand or suspension of the penalty until they commit the same kind of breach, and then the penalty can be applied. Red Bull has issued a statement saying they don't believe in this verdict and they won't stop here. They do have the opportunity to protest this decision, but in case they're proven guilty yet again, they could be deducted points from the Drivers' or the Constructors' Championship. This would eventually see Verstappen losing his championship in the same controversial way he earned it, and the 2022 championship that he won in Suzuka would be his maiden one. Toto Wolff spoke about this matter, saying that it's absurd that the FIA would consider any amount of breach as a minor one, given the fact of how much of an impact even a couple of $1,000s would have on the championship outcome. If you're spending $5 million more and you're still in the minor breach, it still has a big impact on the championship. To give you an idea, we obviously monitor closely which parts are being brought to the track from the top teams every single race, 2021 season and 2022 season. We can see that there are 2 top teams that are just about the same, and there is another team that spends more. So we know exactly that we're spending $3.5 million a year in parts that we bring to the car. And then you can see what difference it makes to spend another $500,000. It would be a difference. We haven't produced lightweight parts for the car in order to bring us down from a double-digit overweight because we simply haven't got the money. So we need to do it for next year's car. We can't homologate a lightweight chassis and bring it in because it's just $2 million that we will be over the cap. So you can see every spend more has a performance advantage, finished Wolff. Now we all know that Sky Sports are orientated pro-Mercedes, but this time they have all the right reasons to do so. Martin Brundle spoke about this situation, saying that the integrity of the sport hasn't been hurt by Red Bull breaching the budget cap, but it will suffer if the FIA doesn't bring the right justice to the Austrian team. If the punishment is too low or too sweet, then all the other teams will be encouraged to spend more money and to face the weak consequences 1 year after they've been found guilty. When talking about this matter, Brundle said, "Not really, no, whether the integrity of the sport has been hurt, as long as the budget cap is controlled, and as long as the penalties are crystal clear and hard enough. I think it's fundamentally a good system, and it's its early stages. We have to remember that. It's just the detail now, and it's got to be made clear that you stick to the cost cap or just under it, otherwise it's going to hurt. What seems crazy to me is that a minor breach can be up to 5% overspent on the cost cap. That's around $7 million. We know that's a massive upgrade on a car, maybe even a B-spec for some teams. It needs tightening up because the other teams will be under pressure. The team boss will be saying, why didn't you do this? Why don't you overspend a bit and pay a fine or get a slap on the wrist and go a tenth or two faster?" finished Brundle. And Ferrari have jumped on the ship of criticising Red Bull, and Binotto has continuously called the FIA for better insight into the 2022 spendings. When the budget cap allegations for the 2021 season came to daylight, Ferrari sporting director said that the FIA needs to be really transparent and to determine the extent of Red Bull's breach prior to them deciding the right penalty for the team. That way, the FIA would make an example out of Red Bull's breach, and other teams would know what is waiting for them if they decide to play with the main weapon that the governing body brought in order to fight the unjustified spending throughout one season. And as for the 2022 season, Binotto has a lot of doubts that Red Bull have already breached the budget cap, and the slight possibility that Verstappen could be stripped of this title sometime in the future still exists. When talking about the new monocoque that Red Bull implemented for the Singapore GP, Binotto said, "I myself have no idea what they're doing, whether they have a lighter chassis or not, but the budget cap is always a concern. In addition to technical and sporting regulations, we also have to deal with financial regulations, and that can also cause differences between the teams purely by how those regulations are interpreted. We need a strong FIA who's on top of this because otherwise those rules are not fair and equal for everyone. But as I said, I can't judge Red Bull's lighter chassis and whether they have it or not, but I do know that Ferrari couldn't do that because of the budget cap," said Binotto, who continued to speak about other teams' possibility to do what Red Bull has done, adding, "I'd be very surprised if another team turns out to be able to do that, and if it is, then we come back to the regulations. Are they fair enough? Do they see equal enough for everyone? And is it adequately monitored? These are big question marks. The rules are still very new and are only checked by a small number of people, so that has to be improved with a view to the future. It would be a bad thing if the championship is determined by financial regulations and not through a technological battle," finished Binotto. So, what do you think is next for Red Bull and the verdict of the FIA? Do you think that we'll see Verstappen being stripped away from his maiden championship? Let us know in the comments below.